All right, guys. So we're in the shop today, and over the last week, I bet I've heard the question asked 10 times. What should my instant center and anti-squat be? And I'm gonna be very, very honest with everybody and just go ahead and say, I have no fucking clue. Like, if you have a really long soft spring in the rear, your anti-squat's gonna need to be less than if you have a shorter, heavier spring in the rear, because the rear end's gonna wanna separate at a faster rate and it's gonna wanna stay up there longer. It's also gonna depend on the shock valving. If you got a really tight shock, you can probably be a little bit more aggressive with it than if you don't have a tight shock. Another thing to take into consideration is the shock length. If you have a very, very long shock, what tends to happen with unequal length stock 4-link stuff, like it's in this car or G-bodies or whatever, is as it separates, the instant center the anti-squat becomes less and less and less. So as it gets further apart, the less pressure it actually applies. So in order to get to the top of the shock, if you have a longer shock, you're gonna need more anti-squat to begin with. If you have a shorter shock, you don't need as much, you're gonna reach the top of it quicker. So, this is the way I like to do things. If I have a car that maybe I saw them at the track and I'm gonna set it up really fast, I don't have my scales with me, I don't have my tape measure with me, I don't have good internet service where I can look up one of our suspension plotting calculators. This is what I like to do, and this is generally the way I set our car up every time before we go to the track for the first time or whatever, because things are gonna be a little different. I can't just give you a perfect number and make it perfect for everybody. So with unequal length bar setups, this is kind of how I start. And then if you need to make some kind of adjustment, you can, okay? What I generally do is set the car at ride height. I'll leave about half of the shock bar sticking out of the tube, half an inch of the shock bar sticking out of the tube. So that way, you can get almost all the stroke up. You'll get almost all the separation you possibly can out of the shock. So I set the car level, adjust the springs where half the shaft is sticking out of the tube, and then I'll set the lower control arm completely flat. And a lot of people are like, oh, completely flat, it needs to be uphill. No, it doesn't, and I'll explain that to you in a second why it doesn't need to be uphill. As it separates, that thing's gonna go uphill. And then once I get that set up, the car's on the ground at ride height, I've got the shock half-inch of shaft sticking out, lower bar is completely level. Then I'll jack the car up and I'll let the rear end hang all the way to the bottom of the shock where it won't go any further. And then I'll take the upper bar and I'll set it level right there. And there's a reason for that. We have found that if you have a higher horsepower car that tends to want to wad the tire up anyway, if you take that upper bar and you go past flat with it, like you extend past flat, what happens is on the gear change, you shock that thing again and it'll actually bounce the rear end and start spinning, or it'll end up wadding the tire up even more because you got a little bit more aggressive with it in the shift. And the whole thing just kind of goes to shit after that. Our car has had a really bad problem. I made a bar adjustment last week and fixed that. But I had a really bad problem when I really started to apply the power. As soon as the gear change come on, it starts shaking the tires. So we need that upper bar to be completely flat when the shock is all the way extended. It can actually be have a little bit more in it. We just don't want to pull it past flat, because what's happening is that the rear end pushes the car, but it does it all with the lower control arms. The upper control arms are actually pulling. The rear end's actually wanting to turn backwards. So it's pulling on the car. So what happens is when the control arm is like this is the front of the car, and this is the rear end, and it's pulling up. So it's rotating back and it's pulling the car up. The more of an angle you put at that, the more aggressive the anti-squat becomes. So I like to take the car, set it on the ground, half-inch of shaft sticking out, lower bars level, jack it up, extend the shock all the way out, set the upper bar level. And then when you let the car back down, the upper bar is at a pretty steep angle, but that's where most of your anti-squat's gonna come from on the starting line. Now, once the car travels out and it starts separating, the rest of the anti-squat's gonna come from the angle on the lower bars. And that's what you want, because that's what's pushing the car. So it's a direct line of pressure onto the back tire. If you find that even at that point, the car wants to shake the tire sometimes or it gets too aggressive with it, at that point, I'll either tighten the shocks up, and if the shocks are all the way tight, which I've run into this before, then I'll start lowering the front of the lower bar some more if I have that option. If I don't, then I'll take just a little bit out of the top bar and flatten it out some more. But that's pretty much it. That's a real quick, easy way. If I'm at the track and somebody's struggling and they ask me for help, that's what I generally go to, is set the car up just like that. If I have a car that we're in a hurry, I don't get to put it on scales, whatever. Most of the time that's our car because I work on everybody else's shit and then I have to get mine kind of when I can get to it. But if I'm in a hurry and I just have to put it together really quick, that's what I'll do. And it usually works first time out of the box. And then you just start looking at videos and seeing if it's too aggressive with the tire. And if it is, get a little bit more aggressive with the rebound adjustment. And if you're out of rebound adjustment, start flattening the bars out a little bit more. But anyway, that's a really good starting point. Really quick way to set the car up to get it to go down the racetrack. But anyway, it's a nice sunny day. I'm gonna piddle around the shop a little bit today. You guys have a great day.